How's it going, everybody? This is Sam back with the Callahan Training Group podcast. I believe this is season 2, episode 4 already. I'm kind of ripping through it, trying to hit a lot of content for you guys. It's early morning here. It's freezing cold because that's when I can get my content done. It's snowy. It's mid-January, but I wanted to go over some fun crossover stuff today that I've been noticing in my own training. Once it gets cold outside, my hands are not really into shooting pistol much, so I like to pick up my PCC and my rifle. And everybody has different opinions on this, and I see a lot of people poo-poo the PCC, and they don't really shoot rifle much either, so they don't really understand what I'm up to. So I wanted to cover this. I think this is going to be a good topic of discussion today. That PCC is not a crime. In fact, PCC is a different game as part of our sport. If you shot production and then shot open, you'd realize that even though they're both pistols, you're shooting a different sport. Same, I mean, it's the same sport, but it's two different divisions that shouldn't be compared. Well, that's what I find PCC is. It's just a different division that allows you to train rifle in the format of USPSA. That's where I'll start. Why do I like that? Because I think USPSA is largely the most efficient and best way to train firearms skills, period. Why? Hit factor training is the better way to train. I covered that one of my last videos. I think our amount of reps, our amount of training, our amount of shots under pressure, our ability to think quickly and all that kind of stuff, the meat and potatoes of USPSA, not the physicality, the mental part of it, it's good no matter what. So why not train like that with all our firearms, right? So USPSA has multi-gun nationals, so we obviously shoot rifles and shotguns too. So PCSL is becoming very popular, but I'll start with this PCC thing because everybody saw PCC come out and everybody kind of split into two divisions. Me as an old three gunner, I got very excited because I was like, oh, cool, man. I got another a place that I could shoot rifles. I love shooting rifles. I think it's a very fun thing to do. It's also, if I'm gonna be, we'll say, practicing my skills for the real world, I'd hope to have a rifle in my hands for a lot of problems, unless it couldn't fit into the place that I was. So I think staying up on my rifle skills, not just being a specialist with one platform, is a good thing. So I saw PCC come out, and I was like, oh, I'm absolutely doing that. I also like to build ARs, just something about me. So I went and built an AR-9 immediately. Now, when you build the AR-9s, especially back when I did this in like 2015, 2016, they were iffy. So the pistols, caliber carbines themselves, the PCCs themselves weren't awesome, but the training with them was still great, and the running them in competitions was still great for a couple of different reasons. What I realized is my shooting system applies 100% still to the rifle. You could start in my first system, my first part of my, or first pillar of my system, we'll put it, it's foundation. Foundation is still eyes lead. You need to have a good stance. You need to have a good foundation in your body. Now that doesn't change with the rifle. I still need to be shoulders pretty much square down range, hips square down range. I don't want to be blading off because I'm not accounting for any actual felt recoil. I need to still be very efficient, very productive. I don't want to just be ready for one target. I want to be ready for everything. It sounds the same thing with the pistol, right? When you move up to grip, obviously grip changes a whole lot because my pistol is now this long. It's now a whole lot longer. But what I have found is wherever my normal pistol grip is, that's generally where I encourage people to leave their weak hand. And you'll notice then that's not a overextended, over rotated C-clamp grip. What I'm just trying to get you to do is find a very familiar position that you'd hold a pistol at, translate it into your rifle, and then look at that. You kind of find that, hey, my shoulders are square down range. My left hand, my weak hand in my case, isn't overly extended. It's not overly bent or anything. It's in a position where I can control the gun, but I don't have a soft position on the gun either, right? Works for me. It kind of works for everybody. That's why I won't tell anybody where to put their hand. I'll tell them how to figure it out, right? So, well, what about grip pressures? Because in pistols, we know grip pressures are very important. Where do I grip the gun? It's almost the same thing here. You want to reduce recoil, you want to increase the control of your gun, you have to increase contact with what I think is your weak hand, just like the pistol. Now, contact to what? It's going to be contact to this little triangle you're building in between your cheek weld and your shoulder itself. So everybody's going to look a little bit different. But my whole goal is my left hand is actually controlling the gun into my foundation here. I have a solid grip now on the gun, quote unquote. My right hand doesn't over torque the gun because my right hand's job is manipulation and pulling triggers. So it's a very similar system, right? Even though it's not a pistol, it's shot like a pistol as far as efficiency goes, right? We just have to translate things like, hey, obviously our draw is a lot different, so you have to dedicate time to the manipulations of draws, reloads, safety on and off, especially moving, things like clearing malfunctions in these guns. So the physical manipulation of it is just something you have to adjust to, kind of like when you're going to, like I mentioned, a production rig to an open rig. It might be the same pistol platform you're using. You might have gone from a Beretta 92 to a Beretta 92 open. You just have to kind of figure out the new manipulations and pieces of the platform. The shooting itself won't actually change, right? So I like that. I think it's pretty cool. The shooting concepts are all the same. The training concepts are the same. But what does that mean? Well, the training concept should be the same, but the metrics are going to be different. The base marks, the benchmarks are going to be a lot different now, right? Well, why? You start to learn a pistol, you start to see other people learn pistols, you start to realize, man, pistols are hard to shoot, rifles are a lot easier to shoot. That's a truth. It is. It's a truth of the matter. What I'll say though is then we have to adjust our standards so that our training is fruitful. If I train for a pistol at 3 yards all the time, is it exactly going to help me? No. So if I train a rifle, if I'm doing 7-yard build drills, 10-yard build drills, is it really going to help me? No. I start to translate that like the typical training distances for rifles should be probably between like outside of 12 out to 33. Most people don't have much more than that on their ranges. If you have out to 100, 200, good for you. Add those kinds of shots. That's an awesome thing to start to have. But you'll start to realize that inside of 12, it's not a game of shooting, it's a game of moving. So this is why I like PCC, I like USPSA. I'll come back to our standards thing, but what I like to say is since the shooting is much easier inside of a USPSA course of fire, the targets are between statistically 0 and 25 yards. The shooting isn't supposed to be very difficult with the PCC, and this is what people get hung up around. It's like, oh, you're shooting a rifle at a pistol match. Yeah, I understand that. My job's a lot different than yours, though. It's the job of keeping the gun up, running, flow. I don't have to it. Our job as PCC shooters become more flow based and more movement based rather than who could pull the trigger faster because we could all pull the trigger real fast. Everybody can achieve splits in the teens, and everybody can keep doubles at a pretty crazy accuracy base. So it becomes who could do that while getting to the last shot the first time. Right. So it's interesting. The PCC game encourages you start to experiment with movement with your rifle more than it does shooting your rifle at high standards. Now, high standards of speed, yeah, but high standards of accuracy is not crazy because USPSA by definition, the accuracy is within, we'll say 33 yards, 25 yards being realistic. If you go to majors, you'll start to see 33-yard shots. Now, if you shoot IPSC, obviously you'll start to see some crazier stuff. You do the IPSC nationals and worlds, especially for PCC, they'll challenge you and throw some stuff out there. But the way I train will cover all that, right? So I talked about the standards go way up, right? Generally speaking, my CTG lab, as I call it, when I'm training people for pistol, it's a 7-yard standard because 7 yards enough to expose any deficiencies, but not let you be careful at the same time. It encourages you to go fast, but it also doesn't let you get away with bullshit, right? So 7 yards for a pistol turns into what I think is about 13, 14 for a rifle. It's not crazy, but it will call your bullshit. You will see weird Charlies. You will see weird shots if you don't have a solid foundation, solid system at 12 to, we'll say 15 yards, depending on who you are and what gun you're shooting. I like that because then what we're doing is training right at that point too, where if I'm stationary training, 12 to 15 yards for a rifle should still be 100% full blast doubles, kind of like 7 is our full blast speed standard, right? Like if I'm standing still at 7 yards, there should be no hesitation and should just be shooting at the speed of sight 100%. I find 12 to 15 yards is where I train that with my PCC, especially with my big bore rifle, with my 5.56. I tend to push that a little bit further because weirdly enough, PCC is a lot harder to shoot than my 5.56 because my 5.56 is tuned like a race car. The PCC, the blowback feels like it feels like it's kicking me in the shoulder where those 223 guns are just kind of sitting there. My dot barely even moves it at all. So inside of that 15 yards, I'm just pulling triggers as fast as I can. I'm trying to increase those benchmarks. I'm trying to say like, hey, doubles are pretty much expected on an open target inside of 15 anywhere, right? Outside of 15, I think shots out to 25 on an open target should be easy for you. Like that's kind of a pretty standard is like 25-yard open target should be, if there's a 3 or 4 of them in a row, you should be able to shoot it bop, 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 like a nice cadence. Like if you were shooting a pistol at 8 or 9 yards, right? It should get comfortable. That starts to mean really what I like to talk about with rifles, a lot more to do with like the DOPE, DOPE, data on previous engagement, knowing where to put my dot when, knowing where my holdovers are, knowing where things like that are, knowing if I have drops at certain distances. And what starts to happen there is PCC in general is a pistol game where we use a carbine, which doesn't mean the carbine is wrong, which it means kind of the targets are too easy for the carbine. So this is where I start to say, like, I like PCSL a little bit better for this. I like two gun a little bit better for this. I like rifle matches a little bit better for this because the targets are going to be geared towards targets. They're going to be geared towards targets where you might need to do a holdover at close distances. You might need to know at 100 yards where you need to put your reticle. You might need to know at 200 yards where I put my reticle, where I hold over and stuff like that, right? So I'll start to push my standards with the rifle out to like 100 yards ish. And I think that's where you should start to understand that that's where the rifle really shines. Inside of 25, it is faster. It's easier to shoot than your pistol, more on the mount and the manipulation. But getting a 15 split versus a 20 split from a rifle to a pistol doesn't really matter. What matters is that you can hold on to that standard outside of that, I'll say 12 yards of the pistols, 15 yards of the pistols, where people stop being like totally aggressive in real life. Well, I can maintain that aggression out to 100 yards now with my rifle if I train correctly. If I have a good solid mount, if I have good solid vision, and I can just maintain that focus. Yeah, the rifles work pretty effectively out to 100. Some argue even further, but I can say 100 yards is pretty much like, if you think 25-yard standards is your pistol standard for accuracy for classifiers, I think 100 yards translates to the rifle pretty well. And what you'll find is those moderate distances, that 50 to 100, is where you will lose a lot of efficiency to other guys at rifle matches. Everybody can rip shots real close up front, right? Everybody can just put a red dot on a target, an open target at 13, at 10 yards and go whap, whap. That's super easy, right? At distance, right? If we all have to mount up and shoot a partial, yeah, you have to mount up, you have to be careful, you have to press the trigger. But what I'll see the difference in, especially when I shot three gun professionally a lot, the guy that sticks in my head is, his name is Andy Snyder. He's a, if I believe correctly, he was a SWAT medic around Philly. Guy spent a lot of time with his rifle. He was a marksman with the rifle. He's real good with it. Him and Kevin from Instagram, as we called him. But these guys were really good with their rifles. And even though I can keep up with them really close, and I'd have not a big deal at longer distances, what they'd kill me is all the intermediate targets. At 75 yards, I'd watch Andy take a row of targets, including no shoots and partials, just like whap, 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 move on. And I started to realize like those intermediate distances with the rifle are really where it shines. It's very much up to, though, having a lot of dope under your data on previous engagements. That dope term, it's about you more knowing what I need to see and feel with my gear, with my stuff. What do I want to see? That's what comes down to like a little bit of gear choice. I'm going to go into some gear choice today. I'm going to go into some of it a little bit, at least my gear choices. I don't like preaching about what you should do, but I'm going to talk about the two rifles behind me and how I use them in the two different rifle applications, PCC and two gun. So really PCSL, that 0 to 200 yard mark is where I want people to start really pushing their rifle. I think that's where you really have to know, hey, at 100 yards, I need to hold like low on the small popper if I have a 200 yard zero, because my bullet is actually above my reticle. If you don't know little things like that, you're going to take 5 or 6 extra shots that Andy Snyder or myself aren't going to take, and we'll beat you based on taking less shots, making less mistakes, not based on shooting much faster. And that becomes the interesting thing with rifle. It's a more precise gun, even though it's faster. So taking less shots with it is generally the way. If you ever have shot three gun before, even if you haven't, you'll show up. I've been guilty of this. I'll be having the best match of my life, show up to the long range stage, and though I shot everything at the long range stage, because I took 5 or 6 makeup shots, sometimes 2 or 3 at each target, that's where I lost that stage, and I'll end up giving away a win, not by missing any targets, not by screwing up my stage plan, but taking more shots than the next guy and realizing, well, that's efficiency. That's just saying I need to know my gun so well that 0 to 200 yards, I waste no time, I waste no energy. I don't want to be guessing outside of 25 because I'm a stud at doing bill drills inside at that distance, right? So I also, for the rifle, I forgot to mention this, for the rifle, I end up using almost exclusively IPSC targets because the target is 33% smaller. The A zone is like 18% smaller. So you're already holding yourself to harder standards just by using that. I think it's just a better target to use for this kind of thing. And then I like to use all the combos of no shoots with the IPSC because you really get good at holdovers. You really get good at understanding, where do I need to put my reticle? How do I need to squeeze my trigger to keep my reticle there? Things like that. So before I go any further, what I really wanted to do is talk about some of my gear choices, right? So we talked about PCC first here. So I like to pick up this gun. And for people who are just listening, I'll describe things. If you happen to be watching, good. I don't know how you can look at my ugly face for this long, so good for you. But I shoot all modern material rifles. This is my modern material PCC. It's a 16-inch PCC. Well, ironically, I was still in Jersey when I bought this gun, so it's pinned and welded. That said, I don't really mind. I like this size for both ballistics and because I don't think any smaller than this is very helpful in our game. There's not a lot of CQB in our game, really. Some people like a little bit shorter. I find it preferential. The other reason I really like this at this size is because of if and when I pick up this other gun, you're going to notice that they're the exact same size. So I am kind of using it as an opportunity to cross train my big bore rifle. But we'll stick on the PCC for now. So I have this 9mm PCC. This is the Modmat Ace 9 from Modern Material. Nothing put on it other than optics. I got this gun from them. It came with a flat face. This came with a velocity trigger. I believe they're rocking Hyperfires now, but it came with a Hyperfire single stage trigger. It comes with a nice comp on the front of it. It comes pretty much ready to race. All I have to do is slap my optics on it and start pulling triggers in the direction I want bullets to go, and things go pretty well. The reason I also like this gun is, one thing I did slap on it, magwell, for classifiers, especially for standing reloads. But one thing I really like about this gun is it eats everything. So there's some people out there who could they build an AR around a load, or there's a competition AR that they specifically use, but it only eats one ammo. This thing eats steel case 115 through Syntech. I shoot Syntech 150, that red lipstick looking stuff through this all the time. Now, my preference for competition through this specifically is Anderson's from Outdoor Dynamics, or he actually has something called missiles. They're 115s. It's basically he has a PCC load. I like these little spicier, little faster loads through this. It works the comp a little bit better, but it does in fact shoot any ammo I've thrown through it, which is nice for training. I could use aluminum case and crappy ammo or whatever's laying around. I'm not really worried about function. So going into the gun itself, optic setup, I have been a Vortex guy for like 15 years, so I'm sticking with Vortex. I love Vortex. First of all, I break a lot of things. So when I break something and they just send me a new one because I'm dumb, that means a lot. Now, even though I break a lot of things, I've been shooting Vortex optics on my pistols. These are the Defenders, but I even want to shout out, I've been using the Venom in competition, national level. I made GM in 2 divisions with a Venom direct milled to a Glock. So they take a beating. They last a long time. I didn't have to warranty any of those. In fact, I have one with almost 250,000 rounds through it that I almost put up like a museum piece because it works so well. So these are on this gun. I have the Vortex Defender. I didn't buy any extra mounts, any extra risers or anything. I rock the riser that comes with the Defender for the primary. So it just sits basically when I mount my gun, it just happens to sit at eye level for me. Now, this is where it might get personal for person to person. You might just want to mount the gun correctly and see, hey, is there a better riser or a better optic situation that gets it more naturally in line with my eye? That said, the risers aren't for speed, they're for fitment. It's not a higher riser equals a better shot. Now, especially in this sport, if you're shooting PCC with a 2.26 holdover, you're going to have a hell of a time at all those easier close-up shots just to gain a quicker mount. So that's a different argument for a different time. But I always get the argument, or not argument, but I always get the question, why the hell do you have 2 dots on this gun? Well, yeah, my primary dot is a razor. Secondary dot is, or I'm sorry, primary dot is a Defender. I have to get used to that. I've switched over. My primary dot's a Defender. I actually happen to have the 8 MOA on top here. Now, my secondary dot is a Defender. What do you know? It's on one of the Vortex 45-degree mounts that you can buy from Vortex for the Defenders. So no customization in here, nothing weird. I just got what works. The reason I have this is for a couple different reasons. If I don't need a stable mount, especially on some closer, easier, lower down targets, it's easier to use my 45-degree mount to kind of hose them down as long as I have good visual acuity on these targets. Targets within like 8 yards, I find, don't need a solid mount as long as there's no risk, meaning open targets, right? Big piece of steel, things like that. So I'll use this 45-degree to basically say, I don't need as much stability. I need more mobility. I'm going to keep moving. I'm not going to wait to get a full mount on this gun. I'm just going to get kind of a half mount on this gun and be able to hammer the trigger as fast as I can see the dot, because I don't really need a good mount for those targets. This 45-degree optic is also awesome for off-angle leans. So I got a huge lesson handed to me, and I think it was Area 8 2022. I shot PCC with one of my students, ironically, and he was just a C-class shooter. Now, I say just a C-class shooter at the time because now he's on the IPSC world team. He just made that. So I'll come back to that. But he was arguing with me for a stage. Stage started with a hard right shot and then a very hard left lean. And I was just like, oh no, I'll just lean. That's fine. I'll just lean around. I have a good strategy for leaning. He actually switched over to his left shoulder to shoot it off his left shoulder because he didn't have a secondary optic. And I was like, it's too much of a waste of time. What ended up happening is I went to go lean. I took a shot. I fell out of position. I had to get back in position to take the second shot again. Both shots ended up being crappy. They were like both C's. There might have been an AC. And it cost me so much time and points that I was like, all right, something needs to change right there. I got trapped by, I don't want to say trapped because that's the wrong word to do it. I lulled myself into a sense of security, and I didn't notice how big the challenge was that the match director had laid out for us. It was a hard lean. The reason I like this is if you watch in video, but I'll try to describe this pretty well, is if I have to stay attached to my upper, my primary optic, it is very hard to get my whole body around a barrel to see a hard lean. But if I want to use this optic, it's a softer mount, and it's very easy for me to kind of push the gun around, still get visual access to a target without having to have full structure on the target and be fully bent around like a barrel or a wall. Now, when I'm describing those targets, I'm also assuming, because we're shooting PCC at USPSA targets, I'm assuming those targets are going to be pretty close targets. You generally don't have a lean around a wall to a 25-yard partial. Generally, these targets I'm describing are point blank around barrel, point blank down below a wall, through a port, stuff like that. So that optic is pretty much specifically for these targets. And the ironic thing that people hate, they hate talking to me about this, that secondary optic is zeroed at about 9 yards. It's not a distance that I think as I go online and I choose because of ballistics, 9 yards is the best ballistics. What I do is, for me, I identify what target doesn't need a difficult mount. What target, open target, let's say at 7-8 yards, what for me personally looks like a take it for granted target. As long as I have a dot on the target, I don't even need the stock on my shoulder. I can pull the trigger twice. That's my starting point. That's the target I start to say, well, that's going to be my zero for my secondary optic. Why? I'm never going to shoot a target that requires a good mount and a good dot placement with a secondary optic. It's me. It's my system. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but this is how I use the secondary optic very successfully. The secondary optic is for targets that require a lesser mount, and that by definition typically means they're within a certain distance. So I have the dot zeroed for those targets. Why? Holdover. There's no holdover for me. If I want 2 shots in the upper alpha of a target right in that credit card, I put a dot on it, I pull the trigger twice. I know this is a rifle, and most people then have to hold over that because their holdover for their primary optic is about 2 inches or so. Now my primary optic is zeroed at 25 yards like normal. Actually, I think I had zeroed this one at 33 specifically. Again, I play my rifle, I play my round, I play my optic. I don't play the internet's ballistics. I actually like to use ballistic calculators on my phone and use math and experience to get my gun doing the things I want it to do. I don't really care about a graph that Reddit wants to argue with me about. But that's kind of my setup for this PCC. It's a pretty simple rifle. It eats everything. I call it big boy controls, where it's got big, easy, ambidextrous safety, big magwell, big ambidextrous charging handle, stuff like that. My double optics, my primary optics zeroed at 25, my secondary optics zeroed at, well, again, let me be more specific. Primary is now at 33, secondary is at 9. This is what I've used to make GM. It works very well for classifiers. I can also shoot stages at GM level, so I don't like that argument. It's not just a stand still and go fast one. It's not just like a carbon fiber, like steel challenge gun. This also can run all the course of fire and everything. I've run this through 2-gun, and I've also run this in back when I was still shooting 3-gun. I shot this through the 2x4 division when you can actually utilize a PCC alongside your 3-gun stuff. So really big fan of this gun. Shout out to Modern Material because I'm about to pull up another one of their rifles. This rifle is their Modern Material. Again, this is their Ace brand. This is like their performance brand. This is just the Ace 5.56. That's all it is. Again, 16-inch gun. Nothing crazy, nothing much different about it. Same handguard, same little hand stop here, all the stuff I like. For a 223 gun, I find it's much more important to find the comp that works your gun well. I happen to have a Griffin Armament comp on this gun. Griffin Armament comps, by the way, work phenomenal. They also happen to take my suppressors for my other guns when I want to shoot politely. Really, it's for me when I'm training. I don't want to sit there and hammer 500 rounds in training with full blast. It's nice. It's nice to take a rifle class with a suppressor. But this gun is set up exactly physically the same as the other gun as far as size, shape, color. Stock's in the same position. It's in the same physical condition. Single stage. This is the hyperfire trigger that comes with it. Again, big dummy controls, a extended 45-degree safety, a big ambidextrous charging handle, stuff like that. That's easy to do. For this, the real big thing that I talk about is because this is a 223 gun and it's not a 9mm, it has the capability for me to precisely put a 223 round at 200 to 300 yards. And now I've made 600-yard contacts with this gun, but this is a 0 to 200-yard gun and it is optimal form. Some will argue 400, but we'll get back to that. The only real difference in this is the optic setup, and the optic setup is almost the same concept with different tools, right? So I have a primary 1 to 10 by Vortex on here, the Vortex Razor 1 to 10. Primary optic, I actually have it risen up in I believe this is a 1.7 mount rather than like the standard 1.5 mount. Why I mentioned it, it's just to match my body, my neck, my style a lot better. I was having a hard time getting behind the eye relief of the 1 to 10 at its lowest mount. I brought it to 1.71 and I'm like, oh, look at that. I don't have to crane my neck over. I can maintain my good cheek weld and my good shoulder pocket here while having my good grip on the gun. All that's really nice. So I really like the Vortex LPVOs, the low power variable optics. The 1 to 6s are plenty for most people. The 1 to 10 is wonderful. Love this thing. I can really see clearly out for a while. For the gamers, I think the 1 to 6 is one of the better optics because it's fast, it's easy, it's clear. It's got a very forgiving eye box, especially on 1X. You could shoot it like a red dot. It's insane. Once you have some good discipline and some good mount built, the 1 to 10 doesn't take anything back. It just gives you extra distance. But if you don't have good discipline on the mount and you don't have good discipline on head position and a good consistent mount, the 1 to 10 is a little bit less forgiving of an eye box, even on 1X. I do like how easy it is to throw the 1 to 10 too. The 1 to 6 is very difficult. It feels like it's got peanut butter in it, but it's the way it's supposed to be designed. I can kind of whip this 1 to 10 around. But if I use this gun the way it's supposed to be used, I don't like to touch that lever if I don't have to, because I also have this configured with, what do you know, a 45-degree red dot. So this is where I learned the lessons from for the double dots, as I call it. I didn't just throw 2 dots in a rifle. I started shooting 3-gun way back in the day. The division I was shooting allowed us to have secondary canted iron sights. It didn't allow for a secondary primary optic. But what we realized is that was very useful for those of us shooting LPVOs, for those of us shooting these scopes, because a lot of these stages that we were running, especially when you got to the state national levels in 3-gun, there were some long distance stages that weren't just like a sniper off. You'd be running through a whole course of fire through like a jungle in South Carolina, through a whole course of fire, shooting targets from 0 to like 12, 15 yards. And then you'd have to post up on something and shoot 150 yard to 400 yard array. And then you'd have to keep shooting targets after that. So instead of having to post up, touch my scope, zoom the gun all the way in, find the targets, and then zoom it back out again, what we typically did was leave the scope set to the further distances and use the 45-degree optic for everything inside a certain distance. And that's where my system started to get developed. I realized, oh, okay, for the targets that I need a better sight picture for, that I need a hard position built for, I will do that. I will earn whatever I need to for the target, whatever it requires. But if it doesn't need that, I'm not going to waste the time. That's what sport shooting is about. We're realizing efficiency. Why waste time doing things that I don't need to do? If I can score the same points as you with less effort, that's how you win gunfights too, by the way. It's not just a USPSA thing. It's not just a 3-gun thing. So this secondary optic thing became pretty big for me. I really like it. It's a huge thing. Now, also shout out to Lotus Defense for these chamber flags. This was pretty cool, by the way, because it you can hear this has a full kit inside of it. I have see if I can crack it for you with one hand. I can. It's got a bunch of batteries. It's got a couple tools in it and stuff like that. So for you rifle shooters, I like having this stuff around because I lose stuff. So it's nice to have a little backup. Shout out Lotus Defense, lotusdefense.com. I believe they have a bunch of those chamber flags. Just a buddy of mine. make anything from that. I just like them. So again, modern material rifles set up pretty realistically. Now, everybody's rifles are set up differently for themselves. I don't like to say you have to set it up one way or another. Some people like different balance points. Some people like this. My big thing, I shoot Glocks. They have to work every time. So just like I said about that 9, this rifle shoots anything that's shaped 223 5.56. Doesn't matter. It's a 223 wild chamber. I can squeeze anything that fits in out of this gun. It shoots it generally decently well. Now, obviously, I get a lot better accuracy if I choose better ammo. That's the one difference about these 5.56 guns. If I buy a 77 grain Sierra Match King, man, you could shoot some 1 MOA groups out to 200 yards, no problem. Now, if I'm shooting Wolf Gold or PMC Bronze or something, I'll still be able to shoot like a 3-4 inch group at 200 yards. Good enough, but it's noticeable at those distances that ammo starts to shine. But what does that mean for me? If it's inside of 200 yards, it doesn't matter, because a 2-inch shift inside of 200 yards isn't going to matter much to me, because I'm not going to plan to miss by more than 2 inches. I know that sounds funny, but if I'm shooting at a 10-inch plate and I shoot at the center of a 10-inch plate, 2-inch group will always get me a hit on that plate. It will always get me a shot in the alpha zone. See what I'm saying? I don't think humans are good enough. I don't think any human is sub 10 MOA, any normal human. I'm sure there's some of you out there. I know there's some of you rifle studs that are yelling at me right now, but there's nobody out there that's really good enough to see those shifts until you start shooting PRS, right? I'm talking 3-gun, 2-gun, USPSA. I'm talking run and gun style stuff. I'm not talking sit still and see how much MOA I could squeeze out of a gun, because I like to do things quickly. So just me. It's not right or wrong, just me. But that becomes pretty much my gear rundown with these guns. Now, again, I mentioned it. This gun, this 223 gun, is set up the same as my PCC as far as where my optics sit and where everything sits. Now, the thing I find that gets interesting with the rifles is the optic is so much closer to your face than your pistol that sometimes you get lulled into staring at the optic a little bit easier than you would in the pistol. And I find that, by the way, occlusion works in a rifle very well if you want to start learning how to shoot 2 eyes open with the rifle, head up with the rifle with the right mount. I actually occlude a lot with the rifle to start to learn that kind of thing. Why? I find that the mounting process makes a lot of sense to most people, right? Like pressure in my left hand, relax my right hand. That's pretty standard for us pistol shooters. Square down range, stance down range, that all makes physical sense. But mentally, I can't help the fact that the pistol optic is all the way out near my left hand. And when I'm shooting a rifle, the optic is over my right hand now. And it's like 3 inches from my face. It's just taking up more of my vision. So when you learn to shoot dots, flip the front sight cap down, tape it over, do whatever you need to do. Start to build your speed around making sure that you have the correct vision in these rifles. Because like I said, the rifle is easier to shoot in general as long as you have a solid mount. So don't cheat. Make sure your eyes are working. Make sure that this is pretty much the same kind of discipline that you would be shooting your rifle with in your pistol. And now I say that discipline word because I find that there's a lot of guys who shoot pistol that I know shoot pistol better than rifle, which is a weird anomaly because pistol's so much harder than shoot than a rifle. If you can apply the same discipline you do to your pistol to a rifle, you're going to find a lot of success. Now, I hear a lot of groans happening when I say that because I find I work with a lot of operators. I won't call anybody specifically out, but you dudes who are studs with your rifle who can't shoot a pistol for shit, and studs with the rifles because they shoot a lot of standing quals and standing qualifications and things like that. And we started to run them through course to fire, and I started to realize these guys who are shooting 100% quals aren't really good with the rifles other than standing and blasting because their quals are 25-yard quals with the rifle. So obviously it's going to be pretty fucking easy. And it turns out that all of a sudden applying this concept of training USPSA, training PCC, training 2-gun, 3-gun made these guys way better with their rifles. And I think the best example was the guy I mentioned earlier in this podcast, Andy. He works with his rifle. He's a stud with his rifle in 3-gun. I don't want to go up against him in a rifle shoot off. If we're shooting plate racks at 200 yards, I don't want to see Andy on the line next to me. He's going to be a problem. He's also an operator in real life. He's an operator as they come. He's in helicopters. He's in gear. He's swatting up and doing his thing. So like, I think there's a lot to be said about the concept of training competition for pistols in general. Obviously, that's who I am. That's Callahan Training Group. But now what I've found is a lot of people end up asking me, okay, you shoot pistol. That's great. Do you also do rifle training? Can we do rifle training? And I'm saying, obviously, well, yeah, obviously, it's just a tool switch out. But I'm realizing that people don't hear that obvious. People don't realize how obvious it is. It is. It's the same training. It's the same way. We just have to adjust our metrics. That 7-yard metric for CTG lab with a pistol becomes 25 yards with a rifle, right? Splits aren't impressive. Transitions are. What does that mean? driving your vision with your rifles. So you're starting to hear all the same things, right? Movement with the rifle. Once I can shoot all these high standards, once I can define what success is in these standards, taking it on the road becomes the next. It's all the same training. You just need to step out of your comfort zone a little bit with this rifle. There's a guy on Instagram right now, Tony Mazza, I believe is his name, who's pushing a lot of this. If you went and checked out his page, he's doing a lot of this where he's shooting partials at 100 yards. He always has a real hard target at 25 yards, all these intermediate weird distances. Having to build a position on these hard targets, because you start to realize, well, just like shooting pistol, when you shoot designated target, one of those targets is always a real hard one, right? Well, what's real hard with the rifle? I'd say like an 80-yard partial. That's a real hard one. Those intermediate distances, that's a real weird one. Having to take two good locked in shots on a piece of paper at 80 yards, not pink a plate at 150, right? I think that's going to be a more meaningful way to train. Basically, the shooting, as always, needs to be subconscious. It needs to be subconscious. Now, with the rifle between 0 and 200 yards, with the PCC between 0 and 33. That's the way I like to look at it, right? So your optics can be set up in there. I think every gun should have a secondary optic on it for a rifle, because there's no loss. There's no, it doesn't weigh anything other than price tag on them. There's no reason to not have a secondary optic there. I've never found a place where it hurts me. But now you could start to say, I don't want to only lean on PCC to call myself a good rifle shooter. PCC is a good way to start because it's accessible. You could shoot steel, it's cheaper ammo, you could shoot matches everywhere. But find a PCSL match, find a 2-gun match, find a rifle match, find a recce match, like a distance match, a gas gun match with your rifle for all I care. Start to build some dope behind those 223 guns. The same kind of comfortable subconscious shooting that you have with your pistol, and start to apply that to your rifle. Start to get those manipulations as subconscious. Start to work that stuff down. I find that it's simple. Easy is not the right word, but it's simple as long as you define it. Rifle shouldn't be this extra thing. It's just kind of like your pistol got longer all of a sudden. Now I got to deal with it, right? Now, when we start to talk about shotguns, because again, I mentioned 3-gun. I also used to shoot sporting clays at a state championship level. I was a very competitive sporting clay shooter. That's where things change a little bit. And I don't want to go into that because most of my people are here for pistol, maybe 2-gun. Nobody really gives a shit about shotguns specifically. And if you do, we'll talk. But really, as always, matches are what's going to be testing all this stuff. So I say that, and I say that at the end because if you stuck with me, you're not here to fight. So I'm not here to challenge anybody when I say that. But major matches in general, especially, but matches, just any match, a local match where you have to show up and do your thing for the first time, cold, every stage in front of other people. Forget about the performance and shoot the next stage. That's going to be where you figure out, are these things subconscious? Is the stuff I'm training for subconscious? Is the test, excuse me, is the test I'm studying for, am I prepared for it? Now, that's a big deal. I hear a lot of people, excuse me, sorry. I see a lot of people preaching performance. I see a lot of people preaching, this is how you shoot faster, this is how you build positions, this is how you do this is how you increase your hit factor, and then they don't shoot matches. I do not care about their opinions. I will always watch, learn. I'm never going to throw out a video. I don't close my eyes, but I just don't argue with people who study for a test they don't take. And this always pisses people off, but I don't care how hard you study and how much you know, because if you can't take the test, I don't care if you tell me you studied as much as a doctor and I know as much as that surgeon. I just didn't take my MCATs. I just didn't take, but I know as much as them. Give me that scalpel. Get the hell out of here. Get out of here. I view it the same way, man. You could think you know as much as every other guy because you shoot 100,000 rounds a year and your range and you do all this training and you have all this. If you don't go to a match and confirm it, no one believes you. I don't care. It's good that you could do it sterile. It's good that you can do it by yourself. It's a building block. You should have to be able to do that first. I agree. It's great that you can do it once. Can you do it the first time? Can you do it the first time every time? That's where if you go back to like my last video, I start to preach a lot of consistency training and start to train for consistency and focus more on consistency than focus on PRs and focus on just hosing rounds, right? You'll start to realize that these matches start to say, hey, am I training in the right direction? And you'll find out very quickly which skills you have up to date to be competitive, to what skills are subconscious, what skills are going to support a high performing stage, and you'll have the evidence to prove it. And you'll also get feedback on what's not so good. What did I think was good? That's always what happens. You go to a match and you think you have a skill under wraps and the match exposes you pretty brutally. That's where you can go back and shift your training. And if you're not getting those feedback, getting that feedback loop, and you're not shifting your training and you're not actually testing against anything, nobody cares. Nobody cares, man. Nobody cares. And I know this gets spicy for some people, but nobody cares. There's guys in the gym that I would bump into that tells me they have the same max as whatever Ronnie Coleman, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm as strong as this guy. My lift's as big as it. Good, go do it then, man. I don't care. We're in retro fitness, dude. Nobody cares. Nobody's watching you. The pressure's not on. I don't know. It's just not the same. I don't give a shit. If you have the theoretical strength, go prove it. If you think you're a badass, go fight. Right? Everybody thinks they could fight. Go fucking do jujitsu. Go jump into an MMA match. Go do an amateur boxing match. Go, if you think you're tough, go ahead and prove it. If you think you're a good shooter, go shoot a match. If you don't have any good local matches near you, go shoot a friggin' major. This isn't very difficult. It's way cheaper than most of, like, if somebody went to the range on a Saturday and just shot a case of ammo with their buddies for 8 hours, a match is actually going to be cheaper than that. So don't be scared. Come out, join us, have some fun. But this is kind of my little synopsis on PCC is not a crime. In fact, I believe that using USPSA to understand the rifle a little bit better and then build the rifle standards the same efficient way that I build them in the pistol world, I think it's a good way. Obviously, the pistol stages are kind of like micro stages for a rifle. So find some 2-gun, find some 3-gun, find some PCSL, find some rifle matches around. If you're in the Northeast PA region, if you're in the Pocono area, find me. That's what I do. We do a lot of 2-gun at my place. I do a lot of 2-gun matches, rifle-only matches. I'm the only person in the area that does rifle-only hit factor matches, it seems, within a drivable distance. I'm one of the only people doing 2-gun matches under PCSL rule sets, and my 2-gun matches are anywhere from bay stages to a 200-yard long distance stage. I also have a jungle run that's become pretty infamous. So if you're looking to test these skills, man, come to Poconos, come play. If not, you could literally message me and hit me up and tell me where you live, and I'll tell you where the best matches are around you. This is what I do. I travel to do it. I know all the other match directors and the dudes doing it. We all know who each other are. We all know who all the other bullshitters are too. So thank you for sticking with me for this one. I love long guns. I love rifles. The reason I want to talk about this is because the only reason I'm here, I started as a 3-gunner. I didn't start to get into USPSA. I started because I was ironically a prepper. I could homestead, right? I have a generator to keep my house running. I know how to garden. I have all these guns stocked up. How do I know how to use them? I wandered out right after college to go find this random 3-gun match because I saw Jerry Mikulik doing it. Why did I want to do 3-gun? Because rifle, pistol, shotgun, it's all the guns that I would intend to shoot zombies with in the afterworld. So let me go test it. And I fell in love with the sport. That's what happened. I fell in love with the sport. I fell in love with the ability to go as fast as you could see. It's you. It's all you, baby. It's you on you. You don't have anybody to look at for your successes or failures other than you. So I fell in love with the sport. 3-gun nation in general died a slow, sad death, similar to how USPSA was looking there for a second, but bounced back. And once 3-gun nation died, and once we couldn't shoot 3-gun under an affiliate anymore, me and all the other real competitive guys, we just realized USPSA is the next incredibly high level competition we can jump into that's also nationally and world recognized. So let's go fight it out. So I don't know if you guys remember, but back in the day, Nils Johannes and JJ Rakaza, we were shooting 3-gun. We were shooting shotguns and shooting claybirds and running through the jungles and stuff like that. So Josh Froelich, Mr. PCC, he was a problem in the 3-gun world. So 3-gun is where I started with all this. So as much as USPSA is fun, and I'm pretty much known as a pistol guy now, known as a USPSA guy now, my past is in 3-gun, and I love a rifle. I love an AR-15. If you talk to me from ages 18 to 25, I was building 3 ARs at any given time. I have all of them around. I'm lucky now to shoot for Modern Material, so I'll shout them out again as I shut this down. Modern Material rifles are some of the best rifles you can go out and buy, both in quality and price. I don't want to go pay $3,500 for some name brand gun that doesn't run as well as this. I've tried them. I've done everything. These guns are affordable. They're out of New Jersey, by the way, my East Coast people. I have codes for you if you want codes. I shoot Vortex optics on top of said guns. I shoot Outdoor Dynamics bullets out of those guns. And if I have anything stuck to my belt, it's with a Ghost Holsters rig. So pretty simple setup in there. Any other questions, comments, concerns about rifle? I love talking this kind of stuff. I try to keep these podcasts now a little bit shorter. I didn't want to drone on too long. I want to be informationally focused. I don't want to just kind of like nerd out too much. So if you ever have questions, comments, concerns, you want me to dive into any of this, message me, email me. I'm cool. But as always, thank you for sticking with me. And don't forget to dry fire.